To begin with, I'd like to say thank you all for the note cards that you sent to me from the last inquiry. I did make some changes and based on your suggestions, so I did dress up a little bit today, and this presentation does incorporate a hypothesis, even though the previous inquiry did not necessarily need to do so. So to begin with, my inquiry this time through is based on the correlation between press frequency and success in the game of diplomacy. And whilst that doesn't make sense to some of you now, as we go through, it will make more sense. And I thought many of you are going to think, well, what is the game of diplomacy? And so I put together a little bit of a show for you in this inquiry to kind of give you a feel for what the game is. So bear with me for the next few minutes as we roll through the slides.
Hello, Italy. Do you think we can share a border peacefully? I think it's in both of our interests to see how things develop with the other nations and possibly work together to fight a mutual foe.
Well, I think that we can work together peacefully. You have the hardest chance of survival, and I have the hardest time expanding. Think I can get Greece this year? That's the only thing that I'm really looking for. I'm open to hearing what you have to say.
Hi, Italy. I won't pretend that a Turkish-Italian relationship isn't difficult, but there's no reason why we cannot work together against Austria and the others. Do you fancy a quick shoot for an attack?
I agree that it's difficult, but not impossible. I'm interested in controlling Greece this year. If you can help me out there, then I'm sure we can work together. Think you can talk Russia out of moving south?
Man, you seem to want a lot. Well, if you attack Austria this year, then I believe we have room to negotiate.
Greetings from the Tsar! Have you heard word from Austria? He sent me a few general statements. Would you be willing to move against him with me if after the first year the opportunity arises?
Possibly. I will be gaining one build this year, but I'd like to examine things for us next year. As a show of good faith, would you be willing to move an extra unit north to keep England busy?
Well, it seems that you didn't attack Austria. Am I to assume that you plan on targeting me?
I haven't decided anything at this point. I'd like for us to continue communicating and see where we get.
This is the part that I hate the most. I played a game where Italy wanted to gain control of Greece too early, and we fought over it while Tunis in the south remained empty. I think we're off to a good start if we can continue working together.
I'll admit that I'm not terribly happy about you not wanting me to have Greece. I'll settle for Tunis this year if you make up for it with Turkish land later.
There appears to be some mistrust between you and Austria. Turkey also says that you don't want to work with him either. How about the two of us cooperate? We could start on destroying Turkey.
I agree with your assessment. I would love to start on attacking Turkey this year and move on to Austria later.
Arg, you lies, you're done lies. You've beaten us all. I knew I never should have trusted you.
It's all your fault, Russia. I told you he was trying to solo. Yes, I was trying for the solo. That's why I'm a ninja. Good game, everyone. I'll take my victory and lead.
Okay, as you can see, the game is based almost entirely on communication. Each player communicates with the other players on the map, and they try and agree on what to do from there. And so players have to work together or against each other in order to win the game. But it's also based on moves, and so I was curious about whether or not the amount of communication between two countries would affect the outcome of the game. And so just for a few definitions, I refer to the word press a lot. That's merely the amount of communication or any individual piece of communication between two or more countries. And then success rating, I also refer to that, and that is simply the percentage of games that a player has either won or drawn. Okay, so that, again, to come back to the question, does more communication result in a better outcome or more victories? And so I have a hypothesis here, that the null hypothesis stating that no relationship exists between press frequency and the outcome of the game, or the success rating. And then I'm attempting to prove or to state that there is a difference between press frequency and success rating, and if I can find a correlation with an R value of 0.7 or more, then that will indicate that I can reject the null hypothesis. So to begin with, I had to get online where I play this game, and everybody online has a profile that looks very similar to this. They each have their own user ID, which I can look up individually, and that way I can gain a sample that is simple, a random sample, as opposed to a convenience sample, and it ensures that my data is a little bit more accurate. And I can input people starting at 5,000, user ID 5,000, and go up until I've accumulated enough data for this experiment. It ensures that the data is unbiased. They also have the number of messages that they've sent in all of their games combined, and then also a win-draw percentage. And so for this, all I had to do was take the number of games that they finished, as in total down here, and then divide that, or take the number of game messages and divide by the number of games to get a messages per game ratio. And then I could compare that to the win-draw percentage of each country involved, or each player. So then, after I obtained my results, I put them to a scatter plot, and I found out that there were two different types of relationships. And this first one here is a linear fit relationship. And it does have an R value of 0.71, showing that linearly I can reject the null hypothesis and state that there is a relationship between the number of messages that a player sends and how well they're able to come away with a win or a draw, or at least the percentage here shown by the y-axis. And then we have 0.31x plus 14 roughly for the equation of that linear fit. And then I was curious, well, is there another fit that might be a little bit better, or is that the only relationship that we can draw from this? And so I did another one, which was logarithmic, and it has an R value of 0.75, which was slightly higher. And so it tends to fit better for a logarithmic function as opposed to just a linear function. And I also did some other trials, and I found, before I get to that, I found that at 70 pieces of data, there was an equal linear fit to the logarithmic fit. But as the number of trials increased, the fit tended to be more logarithmic and less linear. And so I'm estimating that later on, the fit would continue to show that there's more of a logarithmic fit, and that linear fit would slowly drop down below that 0.70 level that I'm looking for. Also, I wanted to find out where this begins to level off, because any type of logarithmic fit, you're going to eventually see a point where the amount of press that you're sending between one country and the next in any given game doesn't really have a major impact in the overall percent increase in your success rating. And I took the derivative here and set it to equal 0.2, and I found that about 93 messages per game is about where that level is, where things start to taper off a little bit more. So that's something of note. So my conclusions on both scales, the null hypothesis is rejected, and that it tended to show that there was a linear fit or a logarithmic fit. And again, I also put as n increases, the relationship becomes less linear, indicating that the relationship I'm assuming will be more logarithmic as opposed to simply linear to determine the success rating. So are there any questions for this? Yes?
I was confused by the derivative part. Go back through that again.
Okay. Okay, I'll just go back to the slide individually. What's your question? Right there.
Bottom left hand corner, you can click on the green arrow.
Okay, my question to you is, you took the derivative of that function, that y equals.
To find the slope of the tangent line at that point, yes.
So you substituted into the derivative 0.2. 0.2 is what?
0.2 is roughly this, the slope here. I wanted to try and get a slope that was closer to 0, and so I picked 0.2 to try and find out where it starts to level off.
Okay.
If I picked a slope that was like 0.1, then the number of messages per game was way down here. I mean, it still begins to taper off, but I felt like 0.2 or 0.3 for the slope.
My issue is that what you have written there is that you've substituted 0.2 for x.
Yes, that for y over x, for the slope of the tangent line.
That's not what that says. That says the slope of the curve at x equal 0.2, which would be at 0.2 messages per game, is 93. So I don't think you said there what you meant to say.
Okay.
You want to say it a little differently now?
To be a punk.
Okay, well, that's the way that I was understanding it, that once you get, if your slope is closer to 0, then things are clearly leveled off at that point, and you're not really making any progress. So I wanted to find a slope that was closely matched to 0 to find out where those messages per game would actually yield a result.
I'd like for you to revisit that, and next time that you see me, be able to tell me a little more about that, because I think I know what you're wanting to do, but you're not writing it mathematically correctly.
Okay.
Now, here's my other question for you. I noticed that you reported r² values in each case.
Those were R values.
You reported r² and r values, it's right there on that slide.
Okay.
Okay, so why are you reporting r² values? What's the significance of reporting the r² values?
Well, the R² values are just the percentage of my data points that can actually be explained by that line.
That's what I wanted you to say, that's good.
Okay. But the R value is what's significant here.
Good.
Because like Excel would not report the R value, I actually had to calculate, it would report the R² value, but I had to calculate the R value.
That's good.
Yes,
Did you say how many people or how many different data points you collected?
there are 100,
Okay.
100 data points. Other questions? Yes?
Why did you do the win and the draw instead of just the win? Because because I'm not familiar with the game, is a draw still considered a small victory, or?
It is, especially in tournaments. Once you get exceptionally skilled players or a group of them, winning is almost obsolete. I mean, you almost can't win a game when you're playing with high caliber, equally matched opponents, because nobody will let you win the game. And so with the alliance structure that goes on in the game, people usually can't obtain a win, so a draw is what's settled for. And so in tournament play and even in online play, a draw is, it's not necessarily as good as a win, but it is still considered a very successful game. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was asking. That's just for curiosity.
Yes.
How does your research help you now win, or will it?
Well, certainly I can compare that to the number of messages that I'm sending in a game, and if they aren't very high, and I did do that, I checked my own, and I was originally at 0.75 roughly, or 75 messages per game, and so that has since bumped up, and there could be, I'm expecting that there would be an improvement in the number of wins and draws that I would have. And that can also help new players who may not necessarily communicate very much, saying, hey, here's a problem that you might be encountering. Others. Thank you very much.